Hello and welcome to this month's Research Matters. Today's presentation is a continuation of last month's Research Matters that covered FDA-regulated drugs and biologics. Dr. Lucy Palmer and I will take you through a journey of FDA-regulated medical devices when involved in research. Today's presentation will be divided into two parts, where I will provide an overview of medical devices and the different classes of devices with examples, the applicability of devices involved in research, and the IRB's role in research involving devices. Dr. Palmer will continue the presentation and discuss the investigational device exemption submission process and cover the support provided by the sponsor investigator team. The hope is that we will provide the necessary information that will assist you in submissions for research involving FDA-regulated medical devices. So the most logical place to begin is to describe to you FDA's definition of a medical device. This definition is important when conducting research involving a medical device because the HRPP and the IRB will apply this definition to your submitted research. Per FDA, a medical device is an instrument, an apparatus, implement, machine, contrivance, implant, in vitro reagent, or other similar related article. An implement is a tool used to perform a job, and a contrivance is a gadget or device that can be used for some particular purpose. An example, while not medical in nature, is think of the blade that's in a blender. So moving on, a medical device is one that is recognized by the U.S. Pharmacopoeia or National Formulary and is intended for the use in diagnosing, curing, mitigating, treating, or preventing disease, and intended to affect the structure of any function of the body, and does not achieve its primary purpose through chemical action within or on the body like a drug does, and is not dependent upon being metabolized for the achievement of any of its primary intended purposes. It is very important to understand the definition of a medical device. If you propose to include a device in your research and you are unsure of whether it is considered a medical device, you need to apply this definition. If you are using a device to diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent a disease or condition, then you are proposing to conduct research using a medical device, and in turn, the IRB will apply regulations that govern medical devices. Now let's discuss the three different classes of devices. All medical devices must fall into one of these categories. Class 1 devices present low or minimal risk of harm, are subject to what's known as general controls, and most of these types of devices are exempt from the regulatory process. General controls are the basic authorities of the medical device amendments that provide the FDA with the means of regulating devices to ensure their safety and effectiveness. General controls apply to all three classes of medical devices. However, they are the only level of controls that apply to Class 1 devices. Class 1 devices are not intended to be for use in supporting or sustaining life, of importance in preventing impairment to human life, and may not present a potential unreasonable risk of illness or injury. Class 2 devices are more complicated than Class 1 devices and require what's known as special controls related to device labeling, guidance, tracking, design, performance standards, and post-marketing monitoring. Most Class 2 devices are cleared devices under the 510 regulatory pathway. Please note that 510K devices are cleared devices and not approved devices. They are cleared because they are considered predicate devices and represent devices that are substantially equivalent to devices currently on the market. Class 3 devices involve the toughest and most stringent regulatory controls because they support or sustain life, they are implanted, and present potential for unreasonable risk in illness and injury. So this slide is meant to provide you with some examples of devices that fall into the different regulatory classes of devices. Believe it or not, a tongue depressor is a medical device. So are latex gloves and breast pumps. These are examples of Class 1 devices. Mechanical-driven wheelchairs, certain blood glucose monitors, and MRI machines are examples of Class 2 devices. And Class 3 devices are those that present the most significant risk to the patient and include sutures, implantable pacemakers, and cochlear implants. I will cover the definition of significant risk devices in an upcoming slide. According to IDE regulations under 21 CFR 812, the following descriptions are considered types of device studies: research involving significant risk, non-significant risk, and studies that are exempt from IDE requirements. Research involving significant risk devices must have an IDE application approved by the FDA and cannot move forward without IRB approval. This type of research must follow IDE requirements regardless if the sponsor is from industry or the sponsor is one of our local investigators. The IDE holder is considered the sponsor and must follow requirements outlined by the FDA. Research involving a non-significant risk device is slightly different, but still must follow what is referred to as abbreviated IDE requirements under 21 CFR 812.2b. Research involving a non-significant risk device are required to include informed consent and IRB review in similar fashion as significant risk devices. The difference remains with what is required to the FDA. Non-significant risk device research does not require submission of an IDE application to the FDA. The third type of device studies includes those that are considered exempt from IDE requirements. Please note, studies exempt from IDE requirements does not mean these studies are not FDA regulated. So now let's move forward to defining what I've discussed. What is the definition of a significant risk device? I've covered the definition of a medical device, so now let's understand what it means when we say significant risk device. A significant risk device is one that's intended as an implant and presents a potential for serious risk to the health, safety, or welfare of a subject. It's purported or represented to be for use supporting or sustaining human life and presents a potential for serious risk to the health, safety, or welfare of a subject, and is for a use of substantial importance in diagnosing, curing, mitigating, or treating disease, or otherwise preventing impairment of human health and presents a potential for serious risk to the health and safety or welfare of a subject. Let's return to the examples I provided for Class 3 devices. Would you agree that a pacemaker supports life and presents a potential for serious risk to the health, safety, or welfare of a subject? I believe we would all say yes. Now let's move to the definition of a non-significant risk device. The FDA finally provides a simple definition, which is a device that does not meet the definition for a significant risk device. Pretty simple, huh? Okay. So I previously outlined the different types of devices under IDE regulations. I want to cover those devices that are exempt from IDE regulations first. According to 21 CFR 812.2c, the following studies are exempt from IDE regulations. The first two bullets speak to devices that are considered predicate devices, which are devices that were already on the market before May 28, 1976, or those devices that the FDA has considered to be substantially equivalent to a device already on the market. These devices are also known as 510K devices, also considered to be cleared by the FDA and again not approved. Moving forward, diagnostic devices are considered to be exempt from IDE requirements when they are non-invasive, does not require an invasive sampling procedure that presents significant risk, does not by design or intention introduce energy into a subject, and is not used as a diagnostic procedure without confirmation by another medically established diagnostic product or procedure. Other types of exempt devices are those that undergo consumer preference testing, testing of a modification, or testing of a combination of two or more devices in commercial distribution, if the testing is not for the purpose of determining safety or effectiveness and does not put subjects at risk. Is a device intended solely for veterinary use? A device shipped solely for research on or with laboratory animals and labeled in accordance with 812.5c. And a custom device as defined in 812.3b, unless the device is being used, again, to determine safety or effectiveness for commercial distribution. Now let's discuss the differences between significant risk and non-significant risk devices. Significant risk devices must have an IDE application approved by the FDA before they proceed. The IRB will not allow you to move forward when you propose to use a significant risk device when its use is investigational without prior FDA IDE approval. There's no exception here. The difference in non-significant risk devices is that they follow abbreviated requirements which outline that the device addresses labeling, IRB approval, informed consent, monitoring, records, reports, and prohibition against device promotion. NSR device studies, non-significant risk device studies, do not have to have an IDE application approved by the FDA, and sponsors and IRBs do not have to report the IRB approval of an NSR device study to the FDA. This means that an IRB may approve a non-significant device study, and an investigator may conduct the study without FDA knowing about it. Now let's discuss the responsibilities of the sponsor when conducting a device study. I will cover the sponsor's responsibilities between significant risk and non-significant risk device research. Starting with significant risk devices, the sponsor must submit an IDE application to the FDA prior to initiating research using a significant risk device. These studies must also be randomized controlled trials for studying the safety and efficacy of said device. The sponsor must obtain all investigators conducting this research at each site agreement to comply with the status of the device being a significant risk device and comply with all applicable regulatory requirements. Sponsors must also provide the IDE number and a copy of the FDA IDE may proceed letter to the IRB. We truly need this number, and the letter assists in solidifying that the IDE number applies to the device in the proposed research. Lastly, while the sponsor may send their SR device study to an IRB for review prior to the IDE application being approved by the FDA, it is advisable to submit your new study to the IRB after you receive FDA IDE approval documentation. The reason for this is that the IRB will ask for this number in the IDE approved documentation. Now let's move to non-significant risk devices and cover the responsibilities of the sponsor. If the sponsor determines that their device is not significant risk, this determination and any supporting documentation should be provided to the reviewing IRB of this determination. This assists the IRB with its determination of the device being studied that the sponsor has identified their device to be a non-significant risk device. In addition, the FDA has provided its determination of the device and concluded that the device is a non-significant risk device. The sponsor should inform this determination to the IRB. When this occurs, it is the FDA's thought that this reduces the IRB's workload. So now let's move to the responsibilities of the IRB when it comes to both significant risk and non-significant risk devices. The IRB is responsible for making a non-significant risk determination for said research when reviewing at the fully convened meeting. If available, as mentioned in the previous slide, the sponsor should provide the IRB with the risk assessment and the rationale for making the determination that the device is non-significant risk. The IRB may agree or disagree with the sponsor's initial non-significant risk device determination. If the IRB determines and agrees that the study involves a non-significant risk device, then the IRB may approve the study using the approval criteria as outlined under 21 CFR 56111. In this scenario, the study may begin without the submission of an IDE application to the FDA. Now to discuss what happens when the IRB does not agree with the sponsor's non-significant risk determination. The IRB has the full authority to not agree with the sponsor's non-significant risk device determination. When the IRB determines that the use of the device is not a non-significant risk device, but instead it determines this device is a significant risk device, the IRB cannot approve the study. In this scenario, the sponsor must in turn submit an IDE application to the FDA. I have previously witnessed this occurrence at an IRB meeting at a previous employer during an IRB meeting, and as you can imagine, the situation creates significant delay in the approval of a study. It behooves researchers who are serving as a sponsor investigator to request FDA consultation prior to submission to the IRB when there may be a question about whether a device is a non-significant risk device. The delay is with the requirement of the sponsor to submit an IDE application when the sponsor may not have anticipated this outcome. Once a sponsor has the FDA IDE approval documentation, then resubmission to the IRB is required. The IRB is finally responsible for documenting these determinations in meeting minutes. Now let's quickly cover the FDA's responsibilities when research involves a non-significant risk and significant risk devices. It should be no surprise that the FDA is the final arbiter in determining whether a device study poses significant or non-significant risk to study participants. It is important to note that the FDA only sees those studies for which sponsors submit to the FDA, or for those studies where the sponsor and/or the IRB requests the FDA's opinion. In similar fashion, with the IRB having the authority to disagree with the non-significant risk decision, the FDA also has the authority to disagree with an IRB's non-significant risk determination. However, the result is the same in that the sponsor is required to submit an IDE application for review and approval by the FDA prior to initiating the research. The FDA can also determine that an IDE application submitted by the sponsor for significant risk device study poses non-significant risk. The FDA will in turn inform the sponsor of its decision in writing. Now let's quickly cover what the requirements are in submitting and noting your device or devices in EIRB. For the purposes of this presentation, I will not cover humanitarian use devices. As you can see here, there are currently only 4 options for device studies in our system: investigational devices that pose either significant risk or non-significant risk, an FDA-approved device being used under its FDA-approved indication, and an FDA-approved device that is not being used per its FDA-approved indication. Section 19 is meant for those devices that, you guessed it, pose significant risk and are investigational. This means that we expect devices where the sponsor obtained an FDA-approved IDE to be listed and uploaded here. This is why we have the device name, the manufacturer, and also places for you to indicate who the IDE holder is and what the IDE number is that was issued by the FDA. If you are a sponsor investigator and hold the IDE, you would need to indicate this in this section. Section 18 is solely for those devices that have been determined to pose non-significant risk and are investigational. This section is not for devices cleared under the 510K regulatory pathway. This is because cleared devices were determined to be substantially equivalent to a device already on the market. Cleared devices being used under their cleared indications are not considered to be investigational. Section 20 is dedicated for those devices that are FDA approved. The expectation is that you will list FDA-approved devices here that are protocol-driven and being studied, where the data collected will support the purpose of your study. Studies that are involving FDA-approved or cleared 510K devices should be listed in this section when those devices are collecting data/information that support your scientific hypothesis. You'll notice we've returned to a section that requests information on the IDE number and the IDE holder. This is because this section is dedicated to those devices that are FDA approved but are not being used in accordance with their FDA approved indication. In most cases, FDA approved devices are those that pose significant risk and previously required an IDE prior to study initiation. When an FDA approved device is being studied for efficacy and safety, submission of an IDE may be required. So I will end my portion of today's presentation with this food for thought. For sponsor investigators, it is important to know your product. What is the intended use of your device product? How does your device function? What claims do you intend to make? In your submission, clearly state the general purpose or the device's function and further describe the disease or condition the device will diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent, and the patient population you intend to study. Thinking of these questions, use this decision tree to serve as a helpful tool for determining whether you may require an IDE submission or whether you may be exempt from IDE requirements. Finally, if you're unsure, please reach out to our resources available to you, as in the HRPP staff and the sponsor investigator IND IDE support team. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And as usual, please submit any of your questions in the Q&A. And we're going to have Lucy bring up her presentation. She's going to continue on about IDEs.
Fantastic. I think you should be able to see my slides. So thank you so much for that, Eric, for all that great information and for making different device regulations so understandable. For the next part of the talk, I would like to focus on the FDA regulatory process and sponsor investigator support for IDEs. So an IDE is an investigational device exemption, which is a regulatory submission that permits an investigational device to be used in a clinical study to collect safety and effectiveness data. So there are 5 main steps in the IDE lifecycle, which take us all the way through from study inception to closing out the IDE. And there's a lot involved in each of these steps and in the IDE process overall. So the aim of this talk is just to focus on steps 1 to 3, so from initial planning through to IDE approval, and break this down to make this process more understandable. So the first thing to say is there is a sponsor investigator support team at UT Southwestern who are here to help you with any questions you may have. This can be for new submissions or existing INDs or IDEs you may have submitted. Raj presented last month on INDs, and this week I will focus on IDEs. But all SI support team members have experience in working on both INDs and IDEs, so we are here to help with any submission you may have. In order to utilize the SI support resources, the best place to go is our website. We have guidance information, we have document templates, we have FDA links and tip sheets. And there's also an option to link for scheduling meetings with our team. So if you want to have a one-on-one consultation and have a discussion about your project any further, then you can click on the link and make a consultation with the SI support team directly. So step 1, initial discussions around your proposed IDE. So the purpose of this is to understand the IDE process, application requirements, and the submission path that you need to go down. Now, this can be completed either through discussion with your PI and your research group if you have experience in previous FDA submissions, or through a one-on-one consultation with the SI support office if you'd like a little bit more help. But the main thing is to figure out next steps. Make sure that you have the templates you need, the guidance that you need, and the support that you require so that you can have a successful application. So once you've got all of that in place, we need to prepare your materials for submission. So the main IDE application package contains all of these components to allow the FDA to come to their decision on your proposal. This is the main portion of the IDE application, and it contains a lot of information. So I've broken it down into investigator prepared sections where you will be expected to be able to provide that information, and then information from external sources where you're going to need to go and find that information from someone else to add into your FDA application. So let's have a look at each of these sections in more detail. So the name and address of the sponsor. The sponsor investigator is going to be your principal investigator. So you're going to need the contact details for your PI, the contact details for UT Southwestern, and then we suggest that you put in some regulatory contact details, which is someone the FDA can speak to. The FDA only speak to people named in the application, so they'll speak to your PI, but if there's anyone else that you want them to be able to speak to, say for example yourself or a member of the SI support team, it's a really good idea to name them in the application so the FDA can speak to them. Report of prior investigations. So this is clinical, animal, lab studies. These could be for approved but related indications if your device is approved for uses other than what you're proposing, or these could be for experimental or investigational uses of the device. We also suggest that you include previous related IDEs which have been approved by the FDA. The FDA likes to see examples of when the device is being used and if it's been approved by them for other investigations. This allows them to assess the risk and safety of the device related to your study, and then also any publications related to your device. Now, all this information can generally be found in the protocol and also potentially in any grant-related applications which your PI may have related to the device. So ask your PI for this information and they should be able to give this to you. Okay, the general investigational plan. So the first part of this is going to be your research protocol. So this is the protocol that you've put together and you're planning to submit to the IRB. The next part of this is really going to focus on risks. The FDA are here to assess risk and safety of using this device in your study. So make sure you really focus on this section and show the FDA that you've given this thought and attention. They really like to see a robust risk section in their IDE applications. This ties in also to the monitoring plan and the DSMB. So the DSMB is the Data Safety and Monitoring Board. You may well have been assigned a DSMB already because they want some oversight over your research. But if you have not been assigned a DSMB, you can talk to your PI and talk about potentially putting a DSMB together. This is another way of showing the FDA that you're taking the risks and safety of your participants really seriously, and they really like to see that study teams are taking this into account. And then obviously they're going to want to see a description of the device components because they want to know like everything that's going on with this device, everything you're using. So again, a lot of this information can generally be found in the protocol and also in any grant application. So your PI should be able to help you with this. Investigator agreement. So the investigator agreement is a document indicating that all researchers using the investigational device will use it in line with the approved protocol with principles of GCP, and that they will provide sufficient documentation to the FDA to prove their appropriateness for inclusion. So we have a template for this on our website, so you can grab this template and then you can fill out the sections to make sure that this is personalized towards your study. Make sure that you have a copy of this for every investigator using the investigational device. So that will be your PI, and then any other researchers who are using the device and any treating physicians. The FDA want to know everyone who's using that device for treatment, not just the principal investigator. And in line with this is the investigator certification. So for every investigator using the device, you will need a CV, a biosketch, if there's one available, and certification of financial disclosure. So the CV and biosketch are so that the FDA can confirm that the investigator is suitable and qualified to use the device. The certification of financial disclosure is basically to confirm if there are any conflicts of interest. Some study teams develop their own devices. That's totally okay. It's just the FDA need to know if there is a vested interest in the device. Again, we have a template of this on our website. So go to our website, download this, you can personalize it for your study, and just make sure you have a copy of this for every investigator using the device. So again, the PI, researchers, treating physicians, whoever is using this device for treatment, make sure you have this information. Informed consent. So the FDA like to see a copy of your informed consent form. Now, you may not have an IRB approved copy of this yet, as it's likely that the IRB have not reviewed your study, as you need the FDA approval before that can happen. That's totally fine. You can just submit the draft of the informed consent form you're going to submit to the IRB, and then update the FDA once your informed consent form is stamped and approved by the IRB. Okay, information from external sources. So a lot of this is going to come from the manufacturer because obviously they're the one who knows best about the device. So if your device is FDA approved, but for a different population or indication, then it will have a product label. Make sure to include any information from the FDA approved product label, as this is still relevant to the device, and it will allow the FDA to see what it has previously been approved for. If your device is not approved, then you'll have an investigator brochure, similar like they do for drugs. And basically, this is like a collection of all information about the device from the manufacturer for anyone using or assessing the device. So this will have manufacturing information, safety information, risks, and all of this information which the FDA can review. A letter of authorization. So in order to use an investigational device, you need approval from the manufacturer. You can't just go and get one off the shelf because it hasn't been approved. It doesn't exist there yet. So the letter of authorization gives this approval, and it also provides the FDA with information about any other previous submissions for this device. This is useful for the FDA as they can then review this against other IDEs or approvals to get more information about how appropriate it would be to use this device in your protocol. The device manufacturer should be able to support you with all of this section, so make sure you reach out to them and get that information. IRB information. So the FDA like to see information about UT Southwestern's IRB. That can be found just in the FWA letter following this link, which has been put together by the HRPP team. Just copy and paste that in. Details for any other investigational institutions. So IDEs do not have a 1572 form similar to INDs. So if you want to conduct your study at other institutions than UT Southwestern, that's fine. But for each additional investigational institution, you need to make sure that you give them enough details. They want to see contact details, institute IRB details, and then details of the investigators at these institutions who will be using the device. So again, they just want to see exactly the same things as you've given for the people at UT Southwestern who are using the device. So go back to the previous sections for the investigator agreements and the certification, get those CVs, get those signed forms, just to make sure that they have all the information to show these investigators are, appropriate to be using the device. And remember, every investigator who's using the device for treatment needs to be completing this, not just each of the site PIs. Labeling. So the manufacturer's label should cover the majority of this. So you can just make sure that you get that label from the manufacturer, get that information and pop it into the report. The statement, caution investigative device limited by federal law to investigational use, they may have that on the label. If they don't, that's a label that you can add as a study team member once the device is shipped and is on site. So you can just add an attestation in the document that you will adhere to that labeling. And then additional information. If there's any other relevant information the FDA may find useful, publications, letters, or anything else, you can include it in this section. Okay, so this is a lot of information. That's the main bulk of your application. But don't worry. Go to our website. We have a template for this application. This contains all of the sections that I just covered. They have the information, they have subheadings to make sure that you complete everything that's needed. So you can just drag and drop the information you have into this template. So please go and download that before you start putting this together. So you've got the main part of the application completed. But before sending this off to the FDA, you're going to need a cover letter so that they can see what this submission is about. So again, go to our website. We have a template for the cover letter. The cover letter template is generic, but then there are sections that you can fill out to make it specific to your application. And the key details that you're going to want to include are the name of the device, details of use, protocol name and brief details. So just give them a bit of information so they're not completely in the dark about what this study is. And then also the contacts again. So remember, the FDA are only going to speak to people named in the application. So put in the names there of anyone who you want the FDA to be able to speak to. Okay, so now we can put together our submission packet. We have our cover letter, our initial IDE submission document, the big document with all the different sections, and then any relevant publications, appendices, letters, anything else that you need to pop in. So the IDE process is pretty antiquated. You're still sending things in on paper. So this is a picture of an annual report that I sent in quite recently. It's pretty much the same idea as an initial submission. You have your one paper copy of the submission with your cover letter, and then you have 2 flash drives which contain identical copies of the submission in PDF format, which we call the e-copy, and we'll come back to that. You'll then send this submission off through snail mail to the document mail center, and everything gets sent to this address. So this is a central document control center where all IDE documents are sent, and then they're processed by the FDA to go to the right department. The only thing you need to determine is who the division director you are going to address your cover letter to is. So you can go onto the FDA website through the link below, and they have a list of all of the divisions. So you can see here we have surgical, we have infection control, we have neurological devices, and basically work out which division your application best fits into and address your letter to that director. But don't worry. Ultimately, the application is going through the central mail center. So if you've addressed it to the wrong director or the FDA thinks it should be sent to a different department, it will still get there. In the following correspondence from the FDA, they'll then let you know which office it has been sent to, and you can just make a note of it. So if initially it did go to the wrong place, you can correct that for the future. So don't worry too much, just make your best guess. Okay, so just finalizing our documents before sending off. So the e-copy system, you're going to want to save your documents as PDF files. And then ideally you want to use the FDA e-submitter software to package. So this is a software where you choose your PDF files and it checks they're compliant with FDA requirements and packages them up all ready to pop onto your flash drive. It's not required, but it is recommended as it should ensure that the files you send off are good for the FDA to use. So it checks they're like the right resolution, the right size, all of those different things. The software is free and easy to download from the link below. Once you've got them all packaged up, make sure that they are named correctly. Each new file needs a prefix number. So if you have 2 files on your flash drive, it's going to be 001, 002. Then they will have the IDE number, or if it's your first submission, then you don't have an IDE number, just pop in 4 zeros. And then it will be investigator last name, name of the document, and the date. Then you're going to pop them in the post. I really suggest you send them via FedEx with tracking details and get that signature proof of delivery so that you can show that it definitely arrived. And then just the SI support submission policy. So you can absolutely send your IDE application by yourself. That's not an issue at all, but you can also let us know if you'd like us to help you. But whatever you do send to the FDA, we ask that you please send us a copy of any submission so that we have a copy for our records for the institution. Okay, so you've sent off all of your applications and the FDA are going to process your documents. So the first thing that happens is they go through e-copy confirmation and review. So the Document Control Center staff will send you an email saying we've received your documents, and they will assign them an IDE number. The Document Control Center staff will then also review the e-copy to confirm compliance and load it into the system. This is where if you use the e-submitter software, it should be good. It's already been checked through. But if it's not, then you will get what's called an e-copy hold. And this basically means that we've received your application, but we can't do anything else with it because we can't get it into the system. And so you essentially then have to resend the submission all over again. So to try and prevent e-copy hold, the best thing you can do is to use the e-submitter software. So once everything is loaded into the system, the FDA have 30 days to review your submission and ask any questions they may have before giving you an answer. They may ask questions, they may not. It totally depends on how comprehensive your application is and if they have anything they want to clarify. Generally, if they do ask questions, I find they wait till about 28 or 29 days, and then they expect a quick turnaround for the questions. So they'll send you an email and they'll want a response in around 24 to 48 hours. So this is where you really want to make sure your PI is keeping a close eye on their email. They should also contact you if you were named in the application, but that's not always the case. So make sure your PI is keeping an eye out. Okay, and after the 30 days, you should get one of 4 answers. Hopefully they will say your IDE is approved. You can also get IDE approved, but with conditions. So this means that they're happy for the research to go ahead, but that there are some things that the FDA still want answered, and they normally give you a time frame which you need to provide a response within, say, 30 to 45 days. You can also get what's called IDE staged approval, where they will allow you to start perhaps the first stage of the protocol, but they still have questions for a later stage of the submission. And so they will give you approval for some of it, and you can still then work through the rest of it. And this can also be with or without conditions. And then a response that we hope that none of you will ever get is, of course, the IDE is not approved. So once IDE approval is granted, the study team should receive the FDA approval letter. And then you need to send a copy of this to the SI support team. And then you also need to upload this letter into EIRB. And this is what Eric was talking about earlier, is this is what the board are going to use to confirm that you have FDA approval for your study to go forward. Okay, so just to tie this back round to the start. So with the approval of your IDE, you've completed steps 1 through 3 of the IDE lifecycle. However, upon approval, your IDE responsibilities have not ended. You still need to update the FDA if there are changes to the protocol. Let them know how things are going in annual reports. Make sure they're aware if there are any safety events or any reporting, and then obviously let them know when you close the study. We'll cover the breakdown of ongoing IDE maintenance in a future talk, but for now, the main thing to know is that the SI support team are also here to help with ongoing IDE queries or requirements. So please feel free to reach out throughout the whole of this process. Sorry. So again, to reiterate, study teams can contact SI support for assistance at any part of the IDE process, from initial planning to new submissions. And I want to refer you all again to our website, where we have lots of resources for support. We have the templates, we have the links, we have tip sheets. SI support assistance is also available via email. Drop us an email, sisupport@utsouthwestern.edu, or we have the link for the one-on-one meetings where you can schedule some time with us. So please do reach out if we can be of any help with your future FDA submissions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you so much, Eric. And so this does conclude the presentations for today's session. So you can submit any questions you have now. If we have ended the session, we'll still hang around a few minutes to be able to answer your questions. So again, I just want to thank you all for attending the monthly Research Matters sessions. August does conclude the sessions for FY22. New Outlook appointments for FY23 will be forthcoming, so be sure to look out for them. And the sessions will continue to be held virtually on the third Tuesday of each month. I would like to just remind you once more of the survey. If you can just spend a few minutes to complete the questions, we will use the information to improve the content of these sessions and how we present them. We will also be able to see what areas we need to work on in the office and what areas we are excelling in. And so with all of that, we're approaching 1 p.m., a few minutes left. I just want to once more thank our presenters, Eric and Lucy and Mayed. And thank you all again for attending today's session. The next Research Matters session is scheduled for September 20th. So with that, I will conclude this and have a great rest of your week.